The night air was thick with the smell of gasoline when it happened. A luxury sedan sputtered to a halt outside a rundown garage, its polished hood steaming. Out stepped a woman in heels too fine for cracked pavement. Yet what froze the moment wasn't the car, or her beauty, but the whisper of an 8-year-old girl. Tugging at her father's sleeve, she looked up at the stranger and said, clear as day, "Daddy, she looks like a mom. Please marry her." The late autumn air carried the scent of burning leaves and gasoline, sharp and familiar to David Miller as he wiped the grease from his hands onto a rag that had seen better days. The sun had just begun to dip behind the horizon, casting the small roadside garage an amber light. It had been another long day, 12 hours bent over aging sedans and rattling pickups. His shoulders ached, his palms were cracked, but there was no time to slow down. Being a single dad didn't come with off hours. Across the lot, 8-year-old Lily sat perched on an overturned bucket, legs swinging, her sketchbook balanced on her knees. Her tongue stuck out in concentration as she drew uneven circles that vaguely resembled tires. Every so often she would glance at her father, her dark curls bouncing as she asked questions about wrenches and spark plugs, and David would answer with patient warmth. He had long ago given up on separating his life as a mechanic from his role as a dad. For Lily, the garage was home as much as their tiny apartment above it. Just as David began lowering the hood of an old Ford, the hiss of an engine cutting out drew his attention. A sleek black sedan, clearly out of place among the beat-up vehicles he usually saw, pulled to the curb. Steam curled faintly from beneath its hood. Out stepped a woman in a tailored coat, her heels clicking against the concrete with hesitation. She paused, scanning the surroundings as if the grit of the garage might cling to her. David noticed the way her eyes lingered on Lily before they shifted back to him, guarded but polite. "Excuse me," she said, her voice smooth but edged with embarrassment. "My car just died on the way back from the city. I think it overheated. Could you take a look?" He gave a curt nod, wiping his hands once more before approaching. "Sure thing. Pop the hood for me." She did as asked, her hands steady, though David caught the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. He leaned in, inhaling the sharp tang of coolant and the subtle sweetness of expensive perfume that drifted from her coat. Within minutes he found the culprit, a cracked hose, nothing serious, though enough to stop a luxury engine in its tracks. "It's not bad," he explained, his tone even. "You'll need a replacement soon, but I can patch it for now. You'll make it home safely." "Thank you," she said, relief softening her features. When he finished the quick repair, he closed the hood and stepped back. She reached into her purse, pulling out a slim wallet, but he raised a hand. "No charge." It was a simple fix. She blinked, clearly unused to such refusals. "At least let me." "No, ma'am," he cut in gently. "I don't take money for something that takes me 10 minutes. Just drive careful till you get it replaced." For a moment she just studied him, as if trying to reconcile his rough hands and oil-stained shirt with the quiet dignity in his tone. Then she smiled, small but genuine. Before David could step away, a soft whisper reached him. Lily had crept closer, her big eyes fixed on the woman. She tugged at the hem of David's shirt and whispered just loud enough for both adults to hear. "Daddy, she looks like a mom. Maybe she could be mine." David froze, heat rushing to his face. The woman's eyes widened, her lips parting in surprise. An awkward silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the distant hum of traffic. "Lily," David muttered, kneeling quickly to his daughter's level. "That's not something we—" But Lily only tilted her head, utterly sincere. "She's pretty. And you fixed her car. Maybe she'll stay." The woman Rachel Carter. She finally introduced herself, let out a soft laugh that held both amusement and something sadder, a note of longing David couldn't place. She crouched slightly so she was eye level with Lily. "You're very sweet," she said. "But I don't think your daddy was expecting a proposal today." Lily grinned, unabashed. Not yet. Rachel looked at David then, her smile lingering, her gaze warmer than before. For the first time in years, David felt an odd stir in his chest, an echo of hope he had long buried. She thanked him once more, sliding back into her car, and with a gentle wave drove off into the fading light. David stood motionless for a while, Lily's innocent words replaying in his mind. He knew better than to let himself imagine anything more. But as the taillights disappeared into the dusk, a strange certainty settled over him. This encounter, born out of a broken hose and a child's unfiltered honesty, was going to change everything. The next morning, David half expected the memory of Rachel Carter's visit to fade like a strange dream. Customers came and went, the clatter of tools and the smell of motor oil filling the hours. But 3 days later, just as he was finishing an oil change on a pickup, the same black sedan pulled into the lot. Rachel stepped out, this time without the guarded hesitation of their first meeting. "I thought you said the patch would last," David remarked, straightening up. "It did," she answered lightly, adjusting her coat. "But you mentioned replacement, and I figured you'd know better than anyone what part to order." He knew enough to recognize an excuse when he heard one, but he didn't call her on it. Instead, he fetched the part from his modest supply, explaining the process while Lily scampered closer, delighted by the unexpected reunion. Over the next few weeks, Rachel returned more than once, sometimes for a tune-up, sometimes under the pretext of needing advice about her car. Each visit left behind an air of warmth that lingered even after she drove away. Lily began to anticipate her presence, setting aside drawings and questions she saved only for Rachel. One evening, when a storm swept across the town and left the garage dim under gray clouds, Rachel arrived carrying a bag of groceries. "I thought you two might use a hot meal tonight," she said, her tone casual but her eyes earnest. David wanted to refuse, his pride rising like a wall, but Lily's gleeful clap of hands disarmed him. "Spaghetti." The girl squealed, and that was the end of his protest. They ate together in the small kitchen above the garage. Lily, her curls damp from the rain, peppered Rachel with questions about her favorite books, colors, and places she had traveled. Rachel answered each with patience, her laughter softening the sterile edges of the apartment. For the first time in years, David caught himself watching not with guarded distance, but with quiet longing. Still, when Rachel left that night, he reminded himself sternly that she didn't belong in their world. It wasn't until the following week that his conviction faltered. Lily had developed a fever one afternoon, her cheeks flushed, her small body trembling under a blanket in the office corner. David hovered anxiously, torn between staying with her and finishing a repair that a loyal customer desperately needed. The man couldn't afford to wait another day. His job depended on that truck running by morning. David's chest tightened with helplessness. That was when Rachel appeared again, umbrella dripping from the rain. She took one look at Lily and without hesitation lifted the child into her arms. "Go finish the repair," she told David firmly. "I'll get her to the hospital. She needs fluids, maybe more. Don't worry, I'll stay with her." Before he could argue, she was already sliding into the back seat with Lily, her hand resting protectively against the girl's damp curls. David stood frozen, wrench in hand, watching his daughter leave with a woman who had somehow slipped past his defenses. When he arrived at the hospital later that night, exhausted and smeared with grease, he found Rachel still in the waiting room, Lily curled asleep against her shoulder. Rachel's own hair was a mess, her coat rumpled, but her arms cradled the girl as if she had been doing it for years. Something inside David cracked. He remembered his late wife, the loneliness that had become second nature, and the countless nights he had convinced himself Lily would never know a mother's warmth again. Yet here was this woman, a stranger only weeks before, who had stepped into their lives with a gentleness that felt both foreign and familiar. On the drive home, Lily murmured sleepily from the back seat, "Thank you, Rachel. You feel like Mom." David gripped the wheel tighter. torn between gratitude and fear. Rachel glanced at him, her eyes reflecting the dashboard lights, and for the first time she spoke of her own past. She revealed that she had once been engaged, only to have the man betray her in a way that shattered her trust. She hadn't believed in marriage since. Her voice trembled, not from weakness but from old wounds. David listened, surprised by the honesty she offered so easily. That night, after settling Lily into bed, he stood alone by the window. He wanted to dismiss what had happened as coincidence, nothing more. But he couldn't shake the image of Rachel carrying his daughter into the hospital, or the sound of Lily whispering words he'd thought lost forever. Something was changing, and for the first time in a long time, David didn't know if he should fight it or let it in. The invitation arrived quietly, slipped into David's calloused hand one evening as he locked up the garage. Rachel's voice had been almost casual. "Come to my place this weekend. Bring Lily. I think it's time you saw where I live." He hesitated, his pride bristling at the thought of stepping into her world, but Lily's excited squeal made refusal impossible. Saturday afternoon found them driving toward the edge of the city, where wide gates opened into a sprawling estate. The house itself was less home than monument glass walls, polished stone, and manicured lawns so perfect they looked unreal. David felt his stomach knot as he parked his battered truck on the pristine driveway. Inside, Rachel guided them through rooms that gleamed with wealth, yet felt cold in their silence. Lily, undeterred, wandered wide-eyed until she found a stack of drawing paper in Rachel's study. With the determination only a child possessed, she drew a picture. Herself, her father, and Rachel, hand in hand beneath a smiling sun. She presented it with pride, declaring, "This is our family." Rachel's eyes glistened as she accepted the drawing. David, though touched, felt the familiar weight of inadequacy press harder. Later, while Rachel prepared tea in the kitchen, David wandered into the library and froze. Framed on the wall was a newspaper article. Carter Automotive announces new CEO, Rachel Carter. His pulse quickened. Carter Automotive, the very company that had once been his employer. Memories surged back. The day he'd been dismissed under accusations of negligence, blamed for a faulty design he had warned management about. His warnings had been ignored, and when the part failed, he became the scapegoat. That disgrace had cost him not just his job but his confidence, leaving him scraping for survival. Now staring at the article, he realized Rachel was not only wealthy but at the helm of the empire that had cast him aside. He said nothing, swallowing the bitterness that rose in his throat. A week later, Rachel invited them both to a company gala, an elegant affair meant to celebrate Carter Automotive's newest engine prototype. David resisted, but she insisted, and Lily's pleading finally swayed him. He borrowed an old suit from a neighbor, its sleeves too short, and tried not to feel out of place under the chandeliers and champagne flutes. The night began smoothly, Rachel introducing him to colleagues as a friend. But when conversation drifted to the new engine design, a familiar face appeared, Robert Hayes, the executive who had once overseen David's department. Hayes smirked as recognition dawned. "Miller? I never thought I'd see you here. Still playing with wrenches in that shack you call a garage?" Laughter rippled among the men around him. David stiffened, trying to keep his composure. But when Hayes bragged about the flawless engine, David couldn't hold his tongue. He pointed out a flaw in the design, his voice calm but firm. "That fuel intake alignment, you'll see overheating within 6 months if it's pushed too hard." The room went quiet. Some looked intrigued. Others exchanged skeptical glances. Hayes sneered. "You always thought you were smarter than everyone else. That arrogance cost you your career." David's chest burned, shame and rage colliding. He glanced at Rachel, who looked torn between admiration and alarm. Then, cutting through the tension, a child's voice rang out. Lily, who had been clutching Rachel's hand, suddenly shouted, "Stop! He's my dad, and she's my mom." Her words echoed across the marble floor, silencing the room. Gasps, laughter, and whispers erupted all at once. Rachel knelt quickly to hush Lily, but the damage was done. Faces turned toward them, a spectacle unfolding. David felt exposed, his daughter's innocent longing laid bare before people who would twist it into gossip. Humiliation clawed at him. Without another word, he pulled Lily close and strode out, ignoring Rachel's pleas. The cold night air slapped his face as he reached the parking lot. He buckled Lily into the truck, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. He loved Rachel, though he hadn't dared admit it even to himself, but now he was convinced their worlds could never mix. She belonged to glass towers and boardrooms. He belonged to grease and broken engines. As he drove away, Lily's small voice whispered from the back seat, "Did I do something wrong, Daddy?" He swallowed hard, his vision blurring. "No, sweetheart," he said softly. "You just told the truth." Yet in his heart, truth had never felt so unbearable. Rachel didn't sleep the night David walked out of the gala. The echo of Lily's voice, so pure, so unguarded, clung to her as she sat alone in her penthouse, staring at the child's drawing she had pinned to her refrigerator. She had built a fortress of glass and steel around her heart after the betrayal years ago, and for the first time she realized how fragile it was. The next morning, she drove to the garage, ignoring the protests of her board, who demanded explanations about her abrupt departure from the gala. David was outside, hunched over a pickup, his face grim. He barely glanced up when she approached. "You shouldn't be here," he said flatly. "Your world doesn't mix with mine. Last night proved that." Rachel swallowed hard. "David, I never saw you as less. You are the most capable, honest man I've met. I don't care what they think. I care about what we could be." He shook his head, wiping grease from his hands with unnecessary force. "You're the CEO of the company that ruined me. I can't shake that. And Lily, she deserves stability, not whispers and stares." His words cut deeper than he intended, and she flinched. For days afterward, they didn't speak. David buried himself in work, avoiding the ache of Lily's questions about Rachel. But fate has its own timing. 2 weeks later, disaster struck. Carter Automotive's brand new engine, the very one paraded at the gala, suffered a catastrophic failure during testing. News spread quickly. Headlines screamed about negligence, safety risks, and potential recalls worth millions. The board was in chaos, investors threatening to pull out. Rachel's phone didn't stop buzzing, but her mind returned again and again to David's calm voice at the gala. That fuel intake alignment will cause overheating. He had been right. He had always been right. Swallowing her pride, Rachel drove once more to the garage. David was there, as always, his hands buried in another engine. "We need you," she said without preamble. He looked up, startled. "Excuse me?" "The prototype," she said, her voice steady despite the storm behind it. "You saw what no one else did. If we don't fix this, hundreds of jobs are gone. The company collapses, and everything I've worked for is finished. Please, help me." He studied her for a long moment. Every instinct screamed at him to turn away, to let the empire that had destroyed him burn. But then he thought of Lily, the girl who had drawn their family with innocent certainty. What kind of man would he be if he taught her that bitterness was stronger than compassion? With a slow nod, he set down his tools. "Show me the engine." At Carter headquarters, the room fell silent when Rachel walked in with David. Engineers shifted uncomfortably. Hayes sneered openly. "You brought him? A mechanic from a shack?" Rachel's voice was ice. "I brought the only man who predicted this failure. Sit down and listen." David ignored the sting of Hayes's words and moved to the prototype, studying it with practiced eyes. For hours he worked alongside the engineers, sketching adjustments, explaining airflow and pressure in plain terms. His grease-stained hands moved with the precision of someone who had lived engines, not just studied them. By dawn they had a fix. Exhausted but resolute, Rachel convened a press conference. Cameras flashed, questions roared. But she silenced the room with one declaration. This company owes its future to David Miller, a single father, a man of integrity, and the finest engineer I've ever known. David, standing awkwardly at the edge of the stage, felt the weight of years lift from his shoulders. For the first time since his dismissal, his dignity was restored, not by revenge, but by truth. As applause rippled through the crowd, he caught Rachel's gaze. There was no pity in her eyes, only respect and something deeper, something he had long denied himself permission to hope for. The press conference had ended with applause, but for David the true victory came afterward, in the quiet of his garage. Reporters had followed him for a week, calling him a miracle mechanic, a man who had saved an empire. Rachel offered him a high-paying role as a technical advisor, complete with an office and staff. He listened politely, then shook his head. "I'm not built for glass towers," he said. "My place is here with Lily. I just want a simple life, one I can trust." Rachel didn't argue. Instead, she began to appear in his world more often. She joined him and Lily at the farmer's market, her polished shoes replaced by sneakers as she carried bags of apples and bread. She helped Lily with homework at the small table above the garage, her laughter filling the cramped apartment. She even tried her hand at tightening bolts under a car hood, smearing grease on her coat and laughing when David shook his head in mock exasperation. Slowly, the icy distance of her penthouse seemed to dissolve. She was learning the language of his world, simple, imperfect, but real. One Saturday, the three of them drove to the park for a picnic. The day was warm, the grass soft beneath their blanket. Lily ran ahead, chasing butterflies, while David and Rachel shared sandwiches and quiet conversation. For the first time, David spoke openly of his late wife, the accident, the years of grief, the crushing weight of raising a child alone. Rachel listened without judgment, her hand resting gently over his. "You've carried so much alone," she said softly. "You don't have to anymore." His throat tightened, but he said nothing, afraid of breaking the fragile peace. Later, as the sun dipped low, Lily plopped down beside them, her cheeks flushed with joy. She leaned into Rachel's side, then turned to her father with wide, earnest eyes. "Daddy," she whispered, "please marry her." The words hung in the air, echoing the very ones she had spoken the day they met. David's heart thudded. He looked at Rachel, expecting awkwardness, but found only tears brimming in her eyes. She pulled Lily close and kissed her hair, her gaze locked on David's. That night, after putting Lily to bed, David sat at his workbench in the garage. His hands moved over an old wrench, the one he had kept since his first day as a mechanic. With quiet care, he worked a thin silver band around it, a ring, simple but strong. When Rachel came by the next evening, he led her to the garage. The smell of oil and metal filled the air, the place that had been his sanctuary for years. He handed her the wrench. Confused, she turned it over until her eyes fell on the ring glinting in the lamplight. "This tool has been with me through every hard day," David said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "It's the only constant I've had besides Lily. But lately, you've become part of that too. I don't have much to offer, no mansion, no boardrooms, no fortune, just life. Just us. Will you share it?" Rachel's hands trembled as she slipped the ring free. Her tears spilled freely now, but her voice was certain. "Yes, David, 1,000 times yes." From the doorway, Lily squealed in delight, having overheard everything. She threw her arms around both of them, her laughter ringing through the garage. In that cramped space filled with oil stains and broken parts, something whole was mended. In the weeks that followed, Rachel balanced her role as CEO with evenings spent cooking with David and Lily, volunteering at community programs, and helping fund a scholarship for young mechanics. She no longer measured success in profit margins, but in moments burned toast at breakfast, homework on the kitchen table, the quiet warmth of belonging. The day they married was small, held under the oak tree by the garage. Friends from the town came, Lily stood proudly in a dress she picked herself. And Rachel's vows were simple. Home is not where you live, but who you love. David, with grease still faint under his nails, kissed her hand and whispered, "Welcome home." Their story was no fairy tale, but it was something stronger proof that healing comes not from wealth or power, but from the courage to love again. In the end, it wasn't a mansion or a fortune that healed them. It was the courage of a little girl's whisper, and the simple strength of a man who refused to give up on love. In a garage stained with grease and memory, David, Rachel, and Lily built something richer than any empire, a family. Their story reminds us that healing doesn't come from wealth, but from choosing each other again and again. If this tale stirred your heart, let us know in the comments. Do you believe love can be rebuilt from broken places? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so more stories of hope and second chances can reach others who need them most.